Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Shadow. Today, we're taking a whirlwind tour through time to see how the bulky corded phones of the past transformed into the sleek, all-powerful devices we carry in our pockets today. Imagine this, it's 1880, and you're tethered to a wooden box on the wall just to hear a loved one's voice. Fast forward 140 years, and that same device can track your health, stream movies, even help you navigate Mars. How did we get here? In the next few minutes, we'll cover all about that, so grab your favorite beverage, hit that like button, and let's dive into the incredible journey of how the humble phone went from stationary to revolutionary, all while reshaping how we live, work, and connect. Let's start with pre-telephone communication. See if you can survive without a phone. Before the invention of the telephone, human societies showcased remarkable creativity and adaptability in bridging the vast physical distances that separated family, friends, rulers, and communities. Each era's communication techniques reflected not only available technologies but also deep cultural values. For millennia, the fundamental challenge lay in transmitting information faster than a person could physically travel, thus birthing a sequence of progressively innovative solutions, from letters and messengers to smoke signals, optical semaphores, and finally the electric telegraph. Handwritten letters served as the singular, enduring form of detailed communication for most of recorded history, whether sent on delicate papyrus scrolls in ancient Egypt, inscribed on clay tablets in Sumer, or written on parchment by medieval monks. Letters could transmit detailed accounts, emotions, and official decrees over immense distances. These messages often required days, weeks, or months for delivery, depending on the geography and the development of postal networks. In the early modern era, remarkable infrastructure innovations such as the Roman cursus publicus enabled by a system of horse relays could deliver messages at up to 50 miles per day, the ancient world's express delivery system. Organized courier systems played essential roles in government, commerce, and warfare. The Persian Angarium included relay stations with fresh horses, a blueprint later reflected in the Roman, Mongolian, and Ottoman empires. The Pony Express exemplified this tradition in the 19th century American West. Carrier pigeons, remarkably accurate and used extensively for military and urgent civil communication, were nature's answer to wireless information delivery. Even in the 20th century, pigeon posts provided vital links during wartime or when other networks failed. I always wanted to receive and send a letter by a carrier pigeon. In medieval town criers wielded bells and strong voices to broadcast news, a human megaphone informing largely illiterate populations. Town square bulletin boards or oral performances, like the bard with his lute, served as early analogs to today's electronic social networks. For situations where distance or speed precluded personal delivery, humans turned to the sky, contingencies of weather, and the ingenuity of color, light, and rhythm. Optical telegraphs, semaphores, heliographs, and acoustic systems, drums, bells, were implemented across cultures and continents. Semaphore systems using towers with pivoting arms and codebooks emerged in revolutionary France in the 1790s, and by the mid-1800s, optical telegraph lines connected cities in France, Britain, Sweden, and Russia. Messages limited to numbers or symbols could be relayed over hundreds of kilometers in tens of minutes, but reliance on daylight and clear weather restricted their use. Other way was heliographs, essentially mirrors flashing Morse code with sunlight, were portable, power-independent, and especially valuable in arid regions and military operations. They could reach hundreds of miles in ideal conditions, with record communication achieved by the U.S. Army between mountains almost 300 kilometers apart. It was impossible to say hi to a distance friend, but at this rate you wouldn't have a distance friend to worry how to greet him. Smoke signals and beacons provided rudimentary but rapid alerts in China, Italy, Korea, and among indigenous peoples in the Americas and Australia. Believe it or not, but I always wanted to do a smoke signal to warn someone from an enemy coming or to go ahead with the plan. Drums, notably the talking drums of West Africa, encoded messages by mimicking local language tonality, allowing complex conversations across several miles with skilled drummers relaying information between villages. Then comes the electric telegraph, that it was the first technology to overcome the speed barrier of physical transport, enabling near-instantaneous transmission of coded short messages over enormous distances by the 1830s and 1840s. Samuel Morse and his associates developed a system that converted letters into symbolic patterns called Morse code, where pulses of current produced clicking sounds, or written marks, interpreted at receiving ends. The first sparks of voice. In 1849, Antonio Musi, an Italian engineer in New York, rigged a simple teletrafono in his home. He stretched wire through his basement walls, attached a diaphragm dipped in acidified water. A few years later, Charles Bourseul published a paper on turning sound vibrations into electrical impulses, an idea he never built. Then in 1861, Johann Philipp Reis crafted a device with a loosely mounted membrane and an electric circuit that made and broke contact. On some days, visitors heard clear phrases like "the horse does not eat cucumber salad," proving the concept but lacking reliability. By 1871, Alexander Graham Bell, fascinated by teaching speech to the deaf, began experimenting with multiple-tone telegraphs at Boston's Volta Laboratory. He and his partner, Thomas Watson, used tuning forks to refine diaphragm designs and tested coils of insulated wire to carry undulating currents. Elisha Gray, an American electrical engineer from Ohio, was a prolific inventor, holding over 70 patents and founding the Western Electric Manufacturing Company. Like Bell, Gray began in the field of harmonic telegraphy, presenting public demonstrations of musical tones transmitted over telegraph wires. His core interest was the multiplexing of messages for profit in the expanding telegraph industry. Gray built a prototype capable of transmitting musical and, in principle, vocal sounds. His most significant telephone-related contribution was the development of a liquid transmitter, in which the vibrations of a membrane modulated an electrical current passing through a conductive liquid in a manner similar to that described in Bell's patent. However, unlike Bell, Gray never focused as intently on voice as opposed to musical notes until near the end of his research. On February 14, 1876, Gray filed a patent caveat, documenting his telephone design just hours after Bell's lawyer officially submitted Bell's patent application. The 1870s saw a swirl of scientific excitement and commercial competition. Bell and Gray each strove to improve the telegraph, backed by wealthy patrons, and both envisioned transmitting voice. Their approaches, Bell's undulatory current and Gray's variable resistance, overlapped significantly. On February 14, 1876, both men's lawyers rushed to the U.S. Patent Office in Washington, D.C. Bell's application, spelling out his improvement in telegraphy, arrived just hours before Gray's caveat for his liquid transmitter, Bell being the fifth entry of the day, Gray the 39th. Patent law at the time prioritized the first to file, not necessarily the first to invent. The controversy that ensued over the next several decades included famous legal challenges, accusations of fraud, and intense business feuding. Ultimately, Bell was awarded U.S. Patent 174,465 on March 7, 1876. Despite many claimants, including Gray, Musi, and Germany's Johann Reis, Bell's patent survived over 600 court challenges, with the Supreme Court upholding his claims. Did Bell borrow Gray's liquid transmitter idea or develop it on his own? At the core is the same mechanism, a needle on a vibrating membrane dipping into conductive fluid to vary circuit resistance with sound, and their designs were almost identical. Some claim Bell's lawyers slipped that concept into his patent after seeing Gray's caveat, yet Bell's lab notebooks and testimony indicate he conceived the liquid transmitter before Gray filed, and still today, the question of who truly invented the telephone stirs debate. Musi's plight reflects the challenges faced by many inventors outside the cultural centers of power and money. He successfully demonstrated a voice-carrying device by 1856 and filed a caveat in 1871. Owing to poverty, inadequate legal counsel, and language barriers, Musi was unable to pay renewal fees or defend his claims. The U.S. House of Representatives' 2002 resolution recognized his overlooked contributions. On March 10, 1876, Bell and Watson were performing experiments in their Boston lab using a liquid transmitter device. In a now famous exchange, Bell spilled acid on himself and called for his assistant, Mr. Watson. "Come here, I want to see you." Watson, in an adjoining room, heard the call clearly and distinctly through the prototype telephone. marking the first successful electrical transmission of intelligible human speech over a wire. Following Alexander Graham Bell's 1876 invention, the telephone system's first decade relied heavily on the concept of a central switchboard. In the earliest form of telephone communication, each pair of telephones was directly connected, limiting conversations to a fixed pair of users. As telephone adoption spread, this approach proved unworkable, so the concept of a centralized exchange arose. The world's first telephone exchange was set up in New Haven, Connecticut, in 1878, using a central switchboard installed by George W. Coy. Initially serving only 21 customers, the switchboard allowed any subscriber to reach another with operator assistance, marking a move away from point-to-point connections. For local calls, one operator sufficed. Long-distance calls, however, demanded a chain of operators. The local operator would signal an operator at a distant exchange, who would complete the next leg of the connection, and so on. The process was slow and labor-intensive, especially as the number of subscribers ballooned. Large private branch exchanges and house exchange systems adapted the plugboard principle for businesses and institutions, requiring specialized operators for internal routing as well. Manual switchboards initially recruited teenage boys to serve as the first operators, building on the success of young men in the telegraphy trade. However, the transition to telephony revealed flaws in this staffing model. Boys were frequently cited for unruly behavior. They would horseplay, abandon positions out of boredom, curse at customers, ignore calls, or become distracted and leave calls unanswered. To address these shortcomings, telephone companies moved quickly to replace boys with young women. Emma Nutt became the world's first female operator on September 1, 1878, in Boston. By the dawn of the 20th century, women dominated the operator workforce in the U.S. and elsewhere, often memorizing hundreds of numbers, maintaining perfect posture for long hours, and adhering to strict codes of conduct in both dress and language. Operators held a unique power. As the functional intermediary for virtually all calls, they could, and sometimes did, listen to private conversations either for innocent reasons or, rarely, for mischief or information gathering. This was a constant concern for customers and an early motivator for increasing telephone privacy, which eventually helped drive the rise of automatic systems. The invention of automatic telephone switching is inseparable from the legend of Almon Brown Stroger, an undertaker in late 19th century Kansas City. As the story goes, Stroger became suspicious that his business was unfairly losing funeral arrangements. He believed calls intended for his services were instead routed, by the operator, who happened to be his competitor's wife, to his rival. When complaints to the telephone company proved unhelpful, Stroger resolved to cut human intermediaries out of the process. Stroger's solution, patented in 1891, was the automatic, step-by-step, telephone exchange, soon known as the Stroger switch. The prototype used the simplest materials, hat pins, electromagnets, and other household items. When a user dialed a number, pulses corresponding to each digit were sent down the line. The Stroger switch responded to this series of electrical pulses by incrementally moving a selector horizontally and vertically to reach the correct circuit. Stroger's system enabled subscribers to dial directly, bypassing the operator entirely. Stroger's exchanges were marketed as girl-less, cuss-less, out-of-order-less, and weightless, a pointed reference to the labor and discipline challenges of manual switchboards. Though the technology was available from the 1890s, major cities and Bell system exchanges were slow to adopt it. By 1910, fewer than 3% of telephone subscribers had access to automatic service, and it was not until the 1920s that large urban centers began installing Stroger-type equipment, mainly to reduce growing labor costs and address privacy concerns. The transition displaced a vast workforce of operators, particularly women. However, women continued to dominate operator jobs for decades, as manual systems remained in place in rural areas, businesses, and some government establishments until the 1970s and beyond. Then it comes the rotary dial is both a mechanical and symbolic leap toward the automated era. Early automatic exchanges, including Strogers, initially used telegraph-type keys to generate dialing pulses, a clumsy arrangement requiring the user to tap out each digit. The search for a more user-friendly mechanism led to the invention and widespread adoption of the rotary dial around 1907 to 1910. And I think this doesn't require an introduction, cause from now on I suppose we're all familiar from what comes next. The rotary dial became synonymous with telephony for much of the 20th century, even after dual-tone multi-frequency, DTMF, touch-tone dialing became standard in the late 20th century. The act of dialing remained part of our language and cultural memory. The transition from separate mouthpiece and receiver, candlestick, sets to the integrated handset marked a significant ergonomic and functional improvement. Early phones required the user to speak into a fixed transmitter and hold a separate receiver to the ear. Gradually, inventors, including employees at Ericsson and others, developed the idea of combining transmitter and receiver into a single handheld unit, the handset, which could be lifted from a cradle and held comfortably. Ericsson introduced its handsets for operators in the 1880s and began marketing a customer version in 1892. The cradle design, in which the handset rests horizontally on a set of mechanical hooks, switch hook, atop a base, became widespread starting around. Lifting the handset from the cradle would close a circuit, causing the phone to signal the exchange or operator, while replacing the handset would end the call. This arrangement allowed one-handed operation and a more natural conversation posture. In popular culture, the cradle phone became a symbol of modernity, from the sleek black Model 500 to the bright, pastel phones of the 1950s. The sturdy, modular design remained the dominant form through the mid-20th century and enabled a new degree of privacy and convenience in the household setting. When the telephone entered widespread use, the question of appropriate etiquette for answering a call was surprisingly contentious. Alexander Graham Bell favored the nautical greeting ahoy, or occasionally ahoy hoy, as the default telephone salutation, believing it to be a clear call for attention over a new and potentially confusing technology. On the other hand, Thomas Edison advocated for hello as the opening word, unlike ahoy, which had maritime associations and conveyed a sense of calling across distance. Hello was already present in American English as an exclamation for attracting attention and was easier to pronounce clearly and quickly. Edison's 1877 letter to the president of the Central District and Printing Telegraph Company recommended hello as the best way to start a call, and his influence was strong. Telephone ownership grew slowly at first, from about 49,000 home lines in 1880 to 600,000 by 1900 and over 2 million by 1910, as networks and regulations standardized infrastructure and cut costs. Urban areas gained service before rural ones. In cities, the telephone girl symbolized modernity, while in the countryside phones became lifelines for social and emergency needs. The evolution of mobile phones from the 1970s to the 1990s marks one of the most significant technological progressions in modern history. From their origins in car-bound analog radio telephones reserved for the military and elite, through the enormous, expensive handheld brick phones of the 1980s, and into the transformative era of digital networks and mass adoption in the 1990s, mobile phones fundamentally reshaped global communication, business practices, and popular culture. The roots of mobile telephony precede modern cellular concepts, extending back to the 1940s and 1950s with what are now called zero-G or pre-cellular mobile radio telephone systems. These initial solutions, known collectively as zero-G, served as the technological precursors to cellular networks, providing radio-based, analog wireless voice communication services, mainly targeted at vehicles. The zero-G technologies included mobile telephone service, improved mobile telephone service, and alternative regional systems. The main users of zero-G car phones in the 1960s and 1970s were high-ranking military officials and business executives, individuals who could justify both the steep cost and the significant operational limitations. In the United States, early adopters included oil magnates, top government agents, and urban police chiefs. The military found the mobile radio telephone invaluable for field communications and command vehicles, forming a bridge between two-way radio and the coming world of personal cellular communication. For civilians, having a car phone was a bold signal of affluence and influence, paralleling luxury cars and private jets in status. Business deals could now be brokered from the back seat of a limousine, and Wall Street elite began to see the car phone as an essential productivity tool and status symbol. The transition from car-bound radio phones to truly handheld mobile devices did not occur overnight. Motorola, building upon decades of two-way radio and military communications expertise, led the charge. In 1973, Martin Cooper and his team at Motorola achieved a landmark. Cooper made the first public call on a handheld mobile phone prototype, the ancestor of the Dyna-TAC series. The call was made on April 3, 1973, on a prototype that weighed an astonishing 2.5 pounds, 1.1 kilograms, was nearly a foot tall, and afforded only 20 minutes of talk time with a 10-hour recharge period. Cooper's vision: individual, portable, personal communication free from cars, wires, or fixed locations, was radical. However, technological and regulatory obstacles meant commercialization would take another decade. Throughout the 1970s, Motorola refined its designs as the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, in the U.S. worked to allocate radio spectrum for cellular networks, with prototypes gradually reduced in size but still largely for demonstration and lobbying purposes. After a decade of research and lobbying, the Motorola Dyna-TAC 8000X became the first handheld mobile phone to gain FCC approval in September 1983 and saw its commercial release in early 1984. Despite its prestige, the Dyna-TAC 8000X's limitations mirrored the shortcomings of the networks it depended upon. Its 30-minute battery life was short, and its 10-hour charge time inconvenient, but for the professionals, financiers, and celebrities who could afford it, these were secondary to the exclusivity and unprecedented mobility the device conferred. Before 1G, mobile meant trunk-filled, car-mounted radio phones with tiny coverage areas, but the cellular breakthrough, splitting regions into low-power antenna cells that reuse frequencies and hand off calls, debuted with Japan's NTT in 1979 and the US AMPS network in 1983, just as Motorola's 2.2 pounds Dyna-TAC brick hit the market, alongside NMT in Scandinavia and TACS in the UK. Although these purely analog systems offered vastly expanded capacity, they suffered crackly, unencrypted calls, spotty urban-only coverage, and high costs, yet by the mid-80s denser cell grids and smaller electronics ushered in truly handheld, more affordable phones that moved mobile telephony from elite novelty to mainstream staple. In the 1980s, mobile phones rapidly transcended their role as mere communication tools and became potent cultural signifiers. High cost, large size, and distinctive design made ownership synonymous with wealth, ambition, and power. 19. The yuppie, young urban professional, subculture of the Reagan era adopted the brick phone along with BMWs, Rolex watches, and power suits as essential accoutrements of success. Popular culture immortalized the Motorola Dyna-TAC as the ultimate status symbol. Gordon Gekko's Brick in Wall Street, 1987, epitomized ruthless ambition. Saved by the Bell showcased it as a teen trophy, and films like American Psycho and The Bonfire of the Vanities turned it into a motif for 1980s excess, cementing mobile phones as tokens of power, reach, and insider status, despite their crackly voice quality, puny battery life, and astronomical price tag. By the late 1980s, the limitations of 1G analog systems were becoming untenable. Limited network capacity, rampant security issues, and growing demand for portability and new services pushed the industry toward digital networks, collectively known as second generation or 2G. The Global System for Mobile Communications, GSM, was the first digital cellular technology to achieve mass adoption. Early development in the late 1980s in Europe culminated in the world's first commercial GSM network launched by Radiolinja in Finland on July 1, 1991. Advantages of GSM included dramatically improved voice quality, smaller, more efficient handsets, and support for new services. SMS text messaging and data services became possible on GSM. GSM quickly spread across Europe and Asia, becoming the de facto global mobile standard. The United States, however, saw a more fragmented landscape. The U.S. market saw the emergence of CDMA, Code Division Multiple Access, with the IS-95 standard, commercially known as CDMA1, spearheaded by Qualcomm in the early to mid-1990s. Its benefits were significant capacity increases, even better sound quality and privacy, and others. A transformative aspect of 2G was the arrival of SMS, short message service. The first ever SMS was sent on December 3, 1992, by British engineer Neil Papworth, His Merry Christmas text sent from a computer to a colleague's Orbital 901 phone on the Vodafone GSM network, initially envisioned as a service for network notices. SMS quickly captured the public's imagination as a social and business communications tool, allowing short written messages to be exchanged even when calls were impossible. Following the first SMS, Nokia introduced the now iconic beep alert for incoming messages in 1993, and by 1999, SMS messages could be exchanged across different mobile networks, unleashing explosive growth in texting. 2G digital networks yielded a cascade of further innovations. Phones became smaller and lighter, greatly extended battery life, enhanced security, and additional features such as caller ID, alphanumeric displays, ringtones, games. This is some of iconic 1990s phones. Nokia 3310, the indestructible legend. Motorola StarTAC, the dawn of the flip phone. Other notable 1990s models. Nokia 8110 banana phone. BlackBerry 850. Motorola MicroTAC. By the late 1990s, mobile phones began encroaching upon the territory of dedicated handheld computing. Devices such as Nokia's Communicator series, beginning 1996, and the IBM Simon, 1994, blended basic telephony with digital calendars, email, and primitive apps, hinting at possibilities beyond simple calls and texts. Yet, the mobile phone of this era was not yet smart in today's sense. Entry was awkward, networks were slow, and these devices lacked the cohesive usability and flexibility now expected from smartphones. Thus, the transition from mobile to smartphone was gradual, marked initially by hardware improvements and only accelerating with the integration of true computing platforms and software ecosystems. While phones marched steadily toward miniaturization and connectivity, another class of device was quietly incubating the ethos of today's smartphone, the personal digital assistant, PDA. PDAs emerged in the late 1980s and early 1990s as portable organizers. Early examples included the Psion Organizer, 1984, Apple Newton MessagePad, 1993, and various devices from Sharp, Casio, and Palm. These featured touchscreens operated via stylus, onboard storage, limited by today's standards, and applications for calendars, contact management, note-taking, and sometimes simple games. Palm, in particular, dominated the PDA domain by the late 1990s. Known for its sleek Palm Pilot and, later, Palm 5 models, Palm delivered elegant software, reliable synchronization with desktop computers, and an early proto-ecosystem of third-party apps. However, despite their sophistication, PDAs lacked integrated telephony. Users often carried both a phone and a PDA, sometimes even physically tethering them for data transfer. Awareness soon grew that the logical next step was a device that merged the communication abilities of a phone with the organizational prowess of the PDA. The result was a new breed, PDA phones, devices that offered both voice data services and mobile computing. Building on the mobile revolution of car phones, bricks, and early analog networks, the stage was set for devices that blurred the line between handheld computer and telephone. Before Apple's 2007 debut, for families of PDA phones tried to marry productivity and portability, but none quite nailed the magic of a true smartphone. BlackBerry. Born in 1999 as a two-way pager, it evolved into the corporate email champion with a full QWERTY keyboard, push email, rock-solid security, and multi-day battery life, designed for business. Its trackball navigation and tiny non-touch screen kept it firmly in the enterprise lane. Palm Trio. Leveraging Palm's PDA roots, early trios, 180, 270, 600, combined a resistive touchscreen and stylus with a small keyboard and Palm OS. They handled calendars, contacts, memos, and slow web browsing, an elegant take on phone PDA fusion, but still hampered by clunky stylus input and limited software. Nokia Communicators. From the 9000 in 1996 to the N95 in 2007, these clamshell giants ran Symbian, packed QWERTY pads or numeric keypads, email, document editing, GPS, and quality cameras. They were powerhouses of features but suffered from fragmented apps, convoluted menus, and heavy, business-first designs. Sony Ericsson P-Series. Models like the P800 and P1i added resistive touchscreens, stylus support, Walkman music players, and CyberShot cameras. They appealed to tech enthusiasts but never broke out of niche circles, still feeling more like gadgets than must-have phones. These devices set the stage for what a smartphone could be, a tool for work and, increasingly, for play. However, their user experiences were often fragmented, inelegant, and centered on productivity, not on intuitive enjoyment, fluidity, or universal appeal. On January 9, 2007, during the Macworld keynote, Steve Jobs took the stage and delivered a now iconic presentation. With a dramatic flair, he announced, "Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone, an iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. Are you getting it? These are not three separate devices, this is one device." This pronouncement foreshadowed the arrival of a product that would upend the expectations set by prior devices. The iPhone merged the best of Apple's iPod, music, a mobile phone, and an internet browser, not as gadgets cobbled together, but integrated in a single fluid touchscreen interface. Crucial among the iPhone's innovations was the multi-touch capacitive display, unlike its predecessors, which relied on resistive touch, needing pressure from a stylus or fingernail, and were sometimes imprecise. The iPhone's capacitive touchscreen responded to the electrical properties of the human finger, enabling simple gestures, swipe to scroll, pinch to zoom, tap to select. No stylus required. Fluid, high-resolution graphics with minimal lag. And their iOS operating system and user experience and the App Store and third-party ecosystem. The App Store and third-party ecosystem and elegant industrial design. The first iPhone combined a sleek glass front with a single button, home, minimalist lines, and a solid build, immediately recognizable and distinct from the plastic-heavy, button-laden competition. This aesthetic sensibility became central to the brand and spurred rivals to up their design game. Almost as soon as the iPhone's impact became clear, the industry scrambled to respond. Google, which had been developing its own mobile OS since acquiring Android Inc. in 2005, accelerated its development in coordination with handset makers. The result was Android, an open-source operating system that manufacturers like HTC, Samsung, Motorola, and LG quickly adopted. The first Android phone, the HTC Dream, T-Mobile G1, launched in October 2008, just over a year after the iPhone, boasting a touchscreen, slide-out keyboard, and support for widgets and the Android market, the precursor to Google Play. Open-source advantage: unlike iOS, Android could be freely adapted by manufacturers, leading to rapid proliferation across price points, brands, and regions. Customizability: Android allowed for greater hardware and software customization. The fierce competition fueled by Apple's tight integration and design prowess forced Android makers to innovate continuously, closing feature gaps, adding multi-touch, app stores, better cameras, etc., and ultimately surpassing rivals like BlackBerry and Nokia in shipment volume by the early 2010s. The direct rivalry between iOS and Android became the defining story of the mobile era, stimulating rapid advances in user experience, hardware capabilities, cloud integration, and AI-driven features. While iOS maintained tight control and a curated ecosystem, Android's openness powered both staggering diversity and occasional fragmentation, giving consumers immense choice, yet also sometimes inconsistent experience. Manufacturers like Samsung, with its Galaxy series, HTC, LG, and later Chinese giants, Huawei, Xiaomi, Oppo, all built their own brands atop Android, driving powerful hardware, advanced cameras, and ever larger, higher resolution displays. Over time, Android and iOS collectively marginalized previous industry leaders, BlackBerry, Palm, signaling a tectonic shift in industry structure and technological priorities. After the iPhone's debut, smartphones morphed from calling devices into pocket-sized multi-tools through breakthroughs in 4 key areas. First, cameras. Early phones captured grainy 0.1 to 0.3 MP images. A rapid megapixel race followed. Example: Nokia's 2 MP N90, N95's 5 MP. The iPhone 4, 2010, made ease of use and image quality central to the experience. Today's flagships sport 3 or 4 lens arrays plus AI-driven computational photography, HDR, night mode. Second, displays. From tiny monochrome or resistive touchscreens to the iPhone's 3.5 capacitive Retina display, 320 by 480. Progress to edge-to-edge OLED/AMOLED panels with 1080p 4K resolution, 120Hz plus refresh rates, and ruggedized glass. 3. Connectivity. 2G per 3G brought basic data and mobile web. 4G LTE unlocked HD streaming, cloud services, and instant sharing. 5G now delivers ultra-low latency and massive bandwidth for AR/VR, real-time gaming, and IoT integration. For sensors, basic accelerometers and mics evolved into full sensor suites, GPS for navigation, gyroscopes for motion tracking, and biometrics, Touch ID, Face ID, for secure unlocking. Additional sensors, ambient light, proximity, barometer, Hall effect, enable adaptive brightness, fitness tracking, and context-aware features. Smartphones have grown from voice-only gadgets into all-in-one pocket companions, replacing point-and-shoot cameras, GPS units, MP3 players, e-readers, and even wallets. They've become our go-to tools for communication, navigation, media, payments, and health tracking, all in a single device. From device consolidation like cameras, GPS, radios, music players, e-readers, and payment cards have largely been absorbed into the smartphone's hardware and apps. To keep you always on connectivity, messaging apps, social networks, and video calls ensure the phone is always the device you have with you, blurring private/public and work/leisure boundaries. It is now an extension of self. Smartphones serve as external memory, personal assistants, and social hubs. The rise of nomophobia, fear of losing your phone, highlights our deep psychological reliance. It helps with cultural transformation. The image-centric platforms, Instagram, TikTok, and instant citizen journalism have reshaped media and activism. At the same time, new debates over privacy, attention spans, and mental health reflect the device's double-edged impact. The smartphone market has reached saturation. Nearly everyone who wants one already owns one, so manufacturers compete on incremental innovations and niche features rather than mass-market breakthroughs. Foldable and flexible screens, exemplified by Samsung's Galaxy Z Fold and Flip lines, Google's Pixel Fold, and models like Honor's Magic V3, have moved from experimental to mainstream, offering devices that expand into tablet-sized displays. At the same time, advances in computational photography leverage on-device AI to merge multiple exposures, enhance low-light shots, and deliver real-time effects that rival standalone cameras. Today's smartphones spark fierce controversy. Consumers call out built-in obsolescence from sealed batteries and updates that hobble older models. Repair advocates campaign for laws that guarantee access to parts, schematics, and tools. Digital well-being champions insist on focus modes and screen time limits to fight notification overload. And privacy watchdogs battle over encryption standards, data ownership, and the rising tide of surveillance. And maybe tomorrow's devices will unfold from compact phones into tablet-sized or wearable screens, project AR overlays through cameras or smart glasses to blend digital cues with the real world, harness on-device AI to predict our needs and personalize every interaction without constant cloud reliance, and ultimately shrink into glasses, or even smart contact lenses, erasing the line between device and self. And we get to live the science fiction we see in movies. I want to see that for sure. And now tell me, what do you think about all this? Do you think you can live without your phone or in pre-phone eras, writing letters, sending them by carrier pigeon? If you can't, then tell me what other features you want in future devices. What ideas do you have for the future? And let's ask that question. Are you an iPhone or Samsung user? Thank you. Hope you enjoyed. See you next time.